Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today I'm joined by James White, the founder of Best10. Best10 is a nutrition-focused app where you get your very own coach who will plan all your meals and workouts for you. They'll also be available to support you 12 hours a day, every single day. In this episode, we discuss things like the lessons he learned from pivoting, needing less money than you think to start, and how grit is the most important part of entrepreneurship. We discuss so many more things in this, and it is a very fascinating conversation. I think you'll learn a lot, and I found it very interesting. I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hi James, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to get into your entrepreneurial journey and the details of what you're working on at the moment. But before we do, could you give us a brief history of James White, where your entrepreneurial journey started and what you're working on now?
Sure. I mean, thanks very much for having me. Really great to be on. Love the concept of your podcast. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
My entrepreneurial journey started in 2012. I left law. I'd studied to be a lawyer and completed my articles. And I really didn't enjoy any of that. Someone once said to me, I hated my first year of law, so I thought I'd give it 7 more years. That's kind of like how I felt. It just was not for me. And I look at something we'll get into, but I feel like most entrepreneurs really feel this like kind of gravitational pull or something towards not what they're currently doing or not what seems stipulated to them. So I ended up opening a gym of all things, which is about as far as you can go from the law. That's certainly not the reason I did it, but people are always surprised by that. And then I grew some gyms from obviously that first one. Ended up opening 6, some in South Africa and 2 in San Francisco in the US. And I exited that business a couple of years ago in 2019, I think. And I opened my current business, which is called Best10, which has been through multiple pivots like most startups do. But effectively what we do now, like my pitch, is that we partner with health insurers and we help them to bring their overweight and obese cohorts, the people who have a body mass index of higher than 25, we help to bring those people back in range. And we do that effectively by scaling experts in the form of dietitians. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Amazing. Okay, so you already touched on kind of what Best10 does, but why is a good diet so important?
Look, I think there's a lot of information out there. I think the generic answer, I'd imagine everybody listening to this podcast knows. Keeping your weight range in range is super important for health benefits and that kind of thing. Look, a diet. I really hate the word diet. We much prefer to talk about nutrition that has a really positive, uplifting connotation, like nourishing your body. And I think that that's probably the most important thing for people to consider, that when it comes to food, you are not depriving your body of anything, right? You should not view what's on your plate as deprivation. It has such a negative connotation. I can't imagine thinking that 3 times a day, every day, and trying to foster any kind of positive relationship with my body or my relationship with food. And so when I think about, rather in the context of nutrition, why it's so important to think of that, I think it just completely changes the way that you look at what you're putting in your body. I think the body is basically made up of debits and credits. You debit your body a lot in the day, right? And people talk about training as an example, but training is still a debit. It's still asking something of your body. And I think the reason good food is so important is because it can just be this huge credit to your body, and it's not even that hard. It's really teed up for us these days in terms of how easy things are, how easy it is to source great products, vitamins, these kinds of things, and that's why I think it's just so important.
And yeah, that's such an interesting frame. That's just changing the way you see it from diet to nutrition can be so helpful in like your nutritional journey. I've never thought of it that way. And you touched on
unfortunately not.
And you touched on Best10 working with insurers, and you said that you're also doing things slightly differently, as you have dietitians available for a chat whenever your clients need them. Would you say this has been an important aspect in the growth of the company?
Look, certainly. I think that nutrition apps are a dime a dozen out there, and SaaS businesses they're great because the GP margins are off the charts, and everything flows to the bottom line and all those things. And I think they absolutely are amazing for a large part of business and what the world needs. But I don't think that they're good for nutrition. I don't think that they're good for nutrition for the cohorts of people who really need help. There are many people in the world who are stuck, and they are stuck through no fault of their own. A lot of the time, people were brought up in homes where they were fed far too much sugar for far too long, and as a result, literally their insulin levels are wrecked. And you've heard people say, like, I can't lose weight. Like, they literally can't lose weight. So they need such a deeper level of care, help, understanding, empathy that an app just doesn't provide. An algorithm does not provide that. A professional does. So I think that is why our product has been so successful, particularly for these types of cohorts. And it doesn't. I don't think I'm giving away any trade secrets here by saying that people with a BMI of 30, 35, 40 are far more likely to get sick, probably do already have a comorbidity of some kind. And that ends up costing health insurers a lot of money. And so health insurance has pivoted I'd say in the last couple of years to prevention and trying to rein in this massive problem of medical inflation, which is just running away with the health insurers because every condition has a drug and drugs cost money and they need to try and stop people getting sicker. And so, I think to answer your question, I think it's played a massive part. Traditionally, I think businesses who do well solve really hard problems. And I feel like we're solving a really hard problem externally, but we're also solving a problem internally of like how to scale individuals. I think it is quite unique.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And what gave you the idea to start Best10?
It came off the back of the other business I mentioned, the gym business. And so the gyms that I had were not like, big global gyms or anything. They were like boutique strength and conditioning facilities. So the name of the game there is obviously the space is smaller, the equipment is less, so the capital overhead is a lot less. But so are the members, right? Your whole thing that you want to do is just try and encourage a lot of engagement and lifetime value. It's as with any business, it's not fun trying to acquire customers. It's expensive. So once you get one, you want to hold them. And in the States, there was this thing that was called PT First, which is personal training first. And I'd never heard of it before. And basically what this thing is it's a revenue generator for these gyms. Because if there's a class going on, and anybody who's watching this or is listening to it's probably been to a class of some kind where they arrived and probably had no idea what at least one thing in there was. Maybe they knew all the movements, but they didn't know where to stand. Like, these are like basics that make a client feel really uncomfortable. And that is not a good situation if you're trying to, somebody to come back for a second class or be a lifetime member. And so PT First was basically you'll meet with a trainer first and they'll assess you. You pay for the assessment. They'll assess you and then they'll see where you need help. And then you'll, like, if it's a lot of help, they'll say, okay, Byron, you need 5 personal training sessions with me and we're going to work on X, Y, and Z. And you do that. And once you graduate, you move into the class, but you obviously arrive there going, I know exactly what to do. Nothing's unfamiliar, right? So that's a really great concept. But a byproduct of that concept was the lifetime value of this. So Zendesk, a company in the States, did a huge survey of like 2,000 of these gyms. And what they found was that if there was like a 1-to-1, so in other words, one trainer to one client, the lifetime value was twice as long as if it was 1-to-2. Because the natural inclination for businesses like these is to go, well, let's just do 4-on-1, like that's the easiest. It's still kind of personal, but it doesn't work because you pay in the long term. And I was just at the time disillusioned with the how to scale this gym business of mine. Basically, it's only opening more gyms. It's expensive and hard and a lot of work. And I thought, well, can we scale this 1-to-1 support element? And so Best10 was born. Nothing like it is today when we launched it. But yeah, that's how we did it.
And what did it look like when you first launched it?
Like it was I would say basic. So it was my sister and I started the business. She subsequently exited to be a teacher actually. But we started and we offered people like a personal trainer and like nutrition support. And I was the personal trainer and Kate, my sister, was the nutrition support. And we got like, I don't know how many diet plans written out by a dietitian. And like we gave people diet plans and we just were literally on WhatsApp all day, every day with these people. Like, have you done it? Like, how's it going? Supporting them. Yeah, I know it's hard. Talking to them, create a relationship with them. And that's literally how we tested the like viability of the product in the market. I'm probably simplifying a little bit, but ostensibly that's what it was like. And I mean, we were lucky we launched right before COVID, which killed some businesses, but in this instance, it was like a rocket ship for ours. And we just got like ton of really positive feedback from the market, knew we had something, knew that this was something that people really wanted, like a deeper level of, expertise, care, understanding, when it was convenient. Because to see a dietitian or a nutritionist or a personal trainer, you got to drive to the gym or go to their office, book an hour out of your day. You leave and you might have questions, and now you can't, like, how am I going to get my questions answered? Or what I don't really like this. What can I substitute for it? Like, this is where we went. I think like this kind of product is much more in the market now, but 4 years ago it wasn't really. That's how we started, and over time, I guess you see what is like kind of killing your margins, what people really like and what people are lukewarm over. And so like things started to change. And now we are like just nutrition only, and we exclusively employ dietitians, qualified dietitians.
Awesome. And how important do you think it is to, take new info on board and then be able to pivot to keep the company going?
Oh my God, that's the secret sauce, like, I think other than the underlying characteristics that an entrepreneur has to have, I'd say that's like part B to that, like, a friend of mine, he's like, one of his favorite sayings in business, which I love, is like, you need to be honest enough with yourself about the things that are not working in your business, because you probably know them already. You probably know them. You just aren't honest enough to admit like this is a disaster. And like the problem with those sorts of things is that they just compound. What's not a good situation now is a worse situation generally in 6 months' time. And so, I think to be able to get enough data, validate it, and make a decision quickly is absolutely imperative. And part B to that, I would say, is use like the MVP, a minimum viable product mantra around that. Because when you're making these sort of like small pivots and small decisions and testing stuff out, you don't want to keep making huge investments into it. You want to test that at like a really like light level, if that makes sense. I love, like, I wrote this piece a while ago, and I like, just in line with this, is like, I had this thing called the mantra of MVP, which is all the decisions relating to the release of a new product must use as little of the following resources as possible: time, money, and staff. And you need to like try and validate that through every iteration of your product. Just like, wow, because it's so tempting to be like, let's just make it super shiny, like, no, that's not going to help anybody. And like, that's another reason, I think, like, to the essence of your podcast here. I think a lot of people who are thinking about a new idea, the first thing they think is like money, right? Geez, I gotta get some cash. Like, I gotta make this. And generally, if you have 10 times the amount you need, you just spend 10 times the amounts on the mistakes that you're going to make anyway. That's like literally the lesson. And that's why you'll hear people much smarter than me say, like, you don't need as much money as you think you do.
Yeah. And a lot of people focus on the wrong things when they first start. Like, they want a beautiful website, or they wait till the product is good enough so that they can take it to people. But like the way you started, where it's a proof of concept and you see that there's demand there, then you can start like helping those people in the right way, because you know that they actually want it, instead of just making some assumptions and not testing the market.
Oh, exactly right. It's a democracy. The market's a democracy. They'll vote with their wallets. And that's the best and worst part of starting anything, because that your friends might lie to you, and your family might lie to you, and your girlfriend or wife might tell you you're amazing. But one day, if you release that thing, the market's going to vote, and you're going to know if you've got something, if you haven't. But that's why I think it's just absolutely essential to release something as soon as possible. Because people won't buy it because you got a fancy website. Friction or a amazing UX journey is not the reason, or a bad UX journey is not the reason you're not selling your products. It's not initially.
Definitely.
It's hard though. It's really, really hard. I mean, when you'll know this, like, when you've got an idea, you kind of tease it out and you talk to people, to actually go and spend money on it, or spend time on it, or ask somebody for money to fund it, or put it on your LinkedIn and say, this is what I'm doing. All those things require like a massive vulnerability. And it's hard being vulnerable in life. Like in a relationship, it's hard being vulnerable. You are now in front of like your worlds, like, sticking the flag into the ground and saying, like, this is what I think will work. This is what I think is going to work. And I think you're going to get feedback on it. I would, there's almost always going to be some negative feedback. It's always going to happen. But I would, and with that in mind, like, because it's always going to happen, just launch it. Just get it going, because whether it's in 6 months' time or now, someone's going to say they don't like it. Of course.
Yeah.
But it's tough. I empathize with anybody starting a business.
And with the vulnerability part, I've found that it's like a muscle that you practice more and more, and it becomes easier as time goes on, as you put more things out there. It's like a combination of realizing that not as many people are paying attention as you think when you first just put it out there. And the second part is the people that are interested are going to come and show you whether it's good or not. So it's like, but that's not going to happen unless you do it over and over again, because there's always going to be that fear of like, what if this is a flop?
Yeah. I mean, exactly right. And you don't get. Someone said to me like recently, like don't tell me you know how to fight if you haven't been in a fight.
Yeah.
Like you can't. Like you've never been at the coalface. So how on earth are you going to tell me what it's like? Like unfortunately, when it comes to these sorts of things, the lessons are at the front line. Like it is. You don't learn the lessons while you and your team are, building a sexy landing page. Like it just doesn't. That's not where the good stuff, the nuggets are found. It's found like in the dirt. And it's hard. It's hard. Like it's really, really difficult. But the flip side of that, and I say this like I would say with love to anybody who's listening, is it's not for everybody, and that's also totally fine. Like I'm sure you feel the same way. Every entrepreneur I've ever spoken to feels the same way. When you are an entrepreneur or serial entrepreneur, there is no other option for you. You have to do this. You have to bring things to life, and some of them flame out and some of them are amazing, but you compelled to do it. There's no the idea of sitting in like a corporate or whatever is just, it doesn't fit with who you are. And so while of course it's hard, just acknowledging the fact that this is what you have like a really unique capacity to do, you must do it.
Yeah, definitely. And out of all the possible directions to pivot from law, what drew you to the fitness space?
Just the opportunity, I think. Like CrossFit at the time was kind of starting to, I would say starting to really become mainstream. In South Africa, I think there was maybe one CrossFit gym in the country. And so this was kind of like the first well-branded like business that showed people that it was different from a Globo gym. Like you could do this thing and it was much more interesting and competitive, and it had all these other like virtues associated with it, like, pushing yourself to like really challenging places that I suppose only certain people really like doing. And geez, I was absolutely taken with CrossFit in 2010, 2011. I did it religiously, but then I went to the States and for like 6 or 8 weeks and just went to like a ton of CrossFit gyms to look, because I had this idea that I wanted to do it. And the more I was there, the more I would see somebody who like, was new to it, or maybe was trying to get back in shape. I mean, I would have considered myself in shape at that point. And all of us, there were things in the class we just couldn't do. And I was like, this seems not great. Like, why? Like, I think I'm a reasonably fit, athletic guy, and I cannot walk on my hands. Like, and then like the RX version, I think is what they term, like let's call it the easier version. It's just never as cool. It's like you're like the guy against the wall, like walking out. And I just thought, CrossFit's amazing. It's had an incredible movement or whatever. But my sense was that if we can just just bring the complexity of this a little bit, narrower, we could have something. And so I opened this gym because I thought like there's a real gap here, and it's already been proven overseas. So yeah, that was the reason I left it. I obviously loved training, but it was the opportunity that I saw.
And many people have these ideas and passion projects that they want to do, just like opening a gym, but they never end up doing it. Would you say that you first having the idea and then traveling to the US to almost on like a recon mission, like doing some research, would you say that research trip gave you the confidence to open your own place?
No, I think personally, I think I would have done it anyway. I think what that trip made, just made me see, it helped me refine the learnings of what I was planning on doing. Just silly things, seeing how gyms are best laid out, how classes are well run, characteristics of good trainers, all those booking forms, just that kind of stuff, I would say. I think that's where it's really valuable. I suppose it's not that dissimilar today to launching a podcast and listening to many, in the same realm as you, and to be like, oh, I like that, I don't like that, that's not really me, that is me, and just refining it. So I think it just sped up that process. I guess I was able to come back to South Africa with something that South Africans hadn't seen before, really, which was great.
Right. And what was it like getting that first gym off the ground? Was it scrappy or was it smooth sailing? Quick interruption from me. The podcast has been growing and I'm really, really happy and really, really proud. But none of that would have been possible without your support. So I really thank you for that. And if I could just ask if you could continue your support and follow the podcast on your podcast listening app, or subscribe to the YouTube channel and like or comment on the video. These little actions mean a lot and really help with the growth. So thanks in advance. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for your continued support. I really appreciate it. Back to the episode.
No. Very scrappy, very, very scrappy. Like 90, I think I took a 90,000 Rand loan from Standard Bank, which allowed me to mat half the premises. So the other half was just like that, like dusty concrete look. So I painted running lanes down the side of it. And like bought 6 barbells, and I couldn't buy a stand, so they all used to lean against the wall, and then sometimes one would fall, so all of them would go, and it was in this like place with awful acoustics, and it would just sound like the world was ending when that fell down. No, it was very, as you can hear, very, very, very scrappy. I had a website, didn't do any marketing, just really relied on some friends and word of mouth. And yeah, look, it was tough. Like the matted part was 250 square meters, and I matted that whole thing myself, which is like just walking up the stairs with like hundreds and hundreds of kilograms of mats. Like it's tough. I mean, it's the equivalent of trying to what we did with Best10. It's like my favorite saying in the world. Like my favorite saying in the world is that everything costs something and everyone pays sooner or later. Everything costs something. So like, if you just think about it, like in the context of not starting the business that you thought of, like where are you going to pay? You're going to pay down the line when time has passed, years have passed, and maybe someone else did it, or the opportunity has passed you by because now you've got bond and children or whatever else. That's where you pay. But equally, if you start it then, you're going to pay then too. Everything costs something and everyone pays sooner or later. And so, like, I think as long as you get comfortable with that, there is a cost to everything. And so, yeah, my cost was that upfront setup, but it was also beautiful. I was 27 years old, like almost like very romantic. One of my closest friends at the time said, you will look back and say this was like the purest form of it all. And at the time you're like, oh my God, just let this end, please. But it was amazing. As I sit here now, I wouldn't change it for sure. I wouldn't change it.
That's a great story. And then your gyms, well, you expanded to more locations and eventually opened a couple in the US. How did that all work? Why open gyms over there and not more in South Africa? What was the idea behind that?
I think, look, at the time, South Africa wasn't looking so good. It was, 2015, 16. That was like where, there was just the state capture stuff came out, and the currency was plummeting. I think a lot of people were like, this is dodgy. I mean, yeah, I think the country could have ended up in a very different place had those next set of elections not gone well, without trying to get too political here. And so that's the reason I was looking offshore. I had an affiliation with a very prominent gym in the US, and I met a guy there who I trusted, and he was moving to San Francisco, and I had the funds. He wanted to do this, like the stars aligned, and we opened it. Like I wanted to get some revenue offshore. I wanted to diversify. I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to see if the American market would like what I was doing. And I certainly had big plans to grow that business, like, franchise it and have hundreds of them. Like, that was definitely my plan initially,
And
which
why
didn't
did that plan?
materialize,
Yeah,
as you
why did
could
that
tell.
plan change? Yeah.
We look, I mean, my wife fell pregnant very, very early on when we moved to San Francisco. Is not the plan. I opened a second one. I think, like, just being there, I didn't love the city. Some things are just not meant to be, really. And I just thought, like,
Definitely.
when we had our little girl, Stevie, it was just lonely. San Francisco is crazy expensive. And I just thought, I'm either going to stay here and try and sort this whole thing out and grow it. But, like, there's going to be a ton of suffering. Like, how much am I ready to endure here? Or I'm going to go back and, be with the people who are important to me and try something different. And so that's what happened. But a lot of valuable lessons. I mean, I would never have had Best10 if I hadn't gone there and done that.
And what would you say was one of or a couple of most important lessons that you learned from that journey?
Look, personally, I mean, maybe this is actually maybe it's a general thing amongst entrepreneurs. I don't know. I think we often think things are simpler or easier than they are. Maybe that's why people start businesses, because they think, like, I can do that. That doesn't seem so hard, or I could definitely do that better, So maybe it's a really good thing. But, like, that was it. I think I went in, probably overconfident. I mean, everything I touched over the last the previous 4 or 5 years had just been an absolute knockout success. We had a really amazing business. It was growing. It was like the brand is still recognized here, but at the time it was, like, really prominent. And so I think I probably had a bit of hubris or something like that, and went just like, okay, cool, let's go I can do this there. So I think I'd caution people. Look, the main lesson I would say is that if the things that matter most to you are in trouble or in flux or not right, and normally that's relationships of some kind, generally the ripple effect into other parts of your life is traumatic. And that's the biggest lesson I learned. We really struggled, missed friends, missed family. Work becomes quite unenjoyable when things are like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. That is such an important lesson. And so, like we've touched on a bit, where you changed from law into health and fitness, but what drove you to take that law degree in the first place if you changed afterwards?
I mean, I would imagine it's the reason most people study something, choose what to study at 17. Like, someone told you should do it. Like, someone said I was good at public speaking and English, so I should do law. Really. And there you go. There's the next 7 years of my life committed to, but you don't know it at the time. I think in 2002, there was probably a bit of a stigma around studying something like a BA, Bachelor of Arts degree. Like, what are you going to do with that kind of thing? Like, definitely, that was like amongst my peer group, I would say. I don't think my old man would have been too thrilled with me doing it either. And so, I think that's why I did it. Like, law is super, like, respectable degree. They say you can use it, you'll always use it forever. Like, sort of true, not really. That's why I did it. That's why I did it.
Yeah, I was the same. I decided to do my degree because it sounded impressive, and I got a kick out of telling people at 18 years old that
Exactly.
that's what I was doing, and I had my whole life planned out. And then while doing the degree, I realized that I completely hated it. So I really resonate with that. But if you could go back and give advice to, like, the younger version of yourself in that time frame where you're deciding on what to study, what would you tell yourself?
Look, this is not lip service, because I'll tell my kids this. I would say I would have an honest conversation around, like, what you like and what you don't like. And then I would encourage that person to do something like a BA, like just take as a degree that allows you to have as broad an experience as possible of, what you might study, what might sort of pique your interest. And yeah, that's what I would say. And I mean, like, it might not be at university. For me, I needed to go to university. I think like that was good structure. I definitely wasn't ready for a gap year or anything like that. But like, again, I would say to somebody like who wanted a gap year, go and do something that is not going to just pigeonhole you, where you're going to get this like broad range of experience, meet lots of different people. That's what you really want to do between, in my opinion, at least between 18, 19 and 22, 23. At least at 23, you've got a better chance of being like, geez, okay, I'm ready to hammer out, commit the next sort of 3 or 4 years of my life to something that I think will, well, I'll actually want to do. I think that's
I agree.
would be my advice. And yours, what would you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I actually have a younger sister who's 9 years younger than me.
Okay.
And although she didn't take me up on the advice, my advice was to go on some sort of gap year where you do like intentional sort of courses of things that you might feel interested in, and do like a 3-month sprint on, say, graphic design and maybe a writing course, or helping out in some office space that you think that business might be interesting, and do bits of that. So then at the end of the year, you've got a few things under your belt, and you may have found something that you actually enjoy, and then you can go commit to a degree in that specific thing, because well, you definitely don't know for sure at that age still, but you have a better chance of knowing that you want to commit to that, like you said, for a longer period of time than just sort of winging it straight out of high school.
Yeah. And those opportunities are just so readily available now. Like, you can do all those courses. I mean, that wasn't really around when I was, when I'd matriculate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it does take, like, I also get the structure of university, because that does take a bit more initiative, and sometimes coming right out of high school, it is tricky to have that much personal control over your life, when in high school everything's sort of laid out for you. I mean, there's schedules and timetables, and then going into university, it kind of continues. You like slowly get given that freedom. And so I also get that, where people need to go into that sort of regular environment, because it's very difficult to be like, okay, I'm going to come up with my own curriculum for the year and phone up these people and send emails and stuff. And so at 18, I also get that, but like, it's also like, hindsight is 2020. And I wish, like, looking back, that's what I would have done with my time after high school. But it's so easy to say that with the knowledge I have now. And like, I probably would have just told myself to fuck off at 18 years old and been like, you don't know what you're talking about. So it's easy to say now, but that's if I could go back, I think that's what I'd do.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
And before we end, I'd like to ask a few more founder focused questions.
Sure.
And we touched on this a bit with your gym journey, but overall, what has been the most valuable lesson that you've learned so far?
In my business journey?
Yeah, in your business journey.
Whoa. Geez, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, I'd probably have to split it up into personal and professional, like, not to be verbose here, but I think that I kind of touched on this earlier. Professionally, particularly as an entrepreneur, as someone who's starting out, the most valuable lesson I learned is that you don't need as much money as you think you do to launch something. I alluded to that earlier in terms of like the MVP. I think that that's the number one thing that people will, I'd say get wrong. Like in years gone by, like funding rounds, seed rounds, very, very, very sexy to post that on your LinkedIn, that you raised or whatever, that somehow vindicates the decision you've made. But you only have to convince a couple of people to give you money. What you got to do is convince a large portion of the market that you're right. And that's why, like, you don't need as much money. Just like launch something with just enough features that you look legitimate. that's like my kind of like framework around that. Because you obviously can't launch an e-commerce business without a website, but that doesn't mean you need like the Rolls Royce of something. Like just look legitimate, and I would say that's kind of the figure that you need financially when you're thinking of launching a business. And look, personally, it's changed a lot, but these days I kind of like trust in the unfolding of the universe, which might sound like quite esoteric or hippie-ish, but as an entrepreneur, you are always trying to force things. I think you're like, I just need this meeting, or God, these people are not responding to me, or I just need this, I just need my break, whatever. But then, as you just mentioned, with hindsight, you can look back and be like, geez, I'm here. How on earth did all of this happen? And it's just like a stream, kind of like that meanders, and that flow of water doesn't try to go through a rock. It realizes the rock is there, and it moves around it. And I feel like just understanding that tension in yourself to know, okay, this is definitely a moment where I like need to push, I need to challenge this person on this thing. And the rest of the time to realize that you actually have something that is growing, that needs to take time to bed in, processes need to start. Yeah, I'd say those are the two things.
Oh, those are both very valuable lessons. And did you always see yourself as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I was 1 week into articles and I was like, geez, you know what I would do differently in this place? Like, definitely, like, I would have gone bankrupt, but I think like that's that's like, I think that's it. And I grew up, my dad had his own business and I never knew any different. Like, that's what I always heard. Like, that's what you got to do. And I don't think that's the reason I did it, because I do think it's in you. Like, I'm sure you know people whose dad's entrepreneurs, but they've chosen to go corporate route, and vice versa. But yeah, that for me, I would be horrible in a corporate.
And do you think entrepreneurship, well, you touched on it a bit there, but do you think entrepreneurship is inherent in everyone, or couldn't we learn parts of it through upbringing and experiences?
I mean, I think it's inherent. I only have my experience to go on. Like, as I alluded to earlier, like, there seems to be something in the people that I know that there is no alternative for them. Like, because it's so hard, you just like, you guys must be suckers for punishment. Like, how do you keep doing this? When like a cushier guaranteed salary that's going to go up with escalation, like, is waiting for you. Like, a lot of these people are highly qualified. Like, I'm pretty sure I could get a job, at a health insurer or something like that. But there's just this calling that you just cannot ignore. It's this thing that, just eats away at you. I love the idea of the thought of like, this unique capacity that an entrepreneur has to endure. And like, not many people have that particular unique capacity. There are some people with this unique capacity to be able to deal with and navigate all the things that go on in an enormous corporate and manage shareholders and a board or whatever. There's some people who have a unique capacity to teach 4-year-old children every day, which I definitely don't. I have neither of those other two, but there's this one that I have, and I don't know anything else. And I have to honor it. I think if I'm, and I believe entrepreneurs have to honor this if they're to have the impact on the world that they should have.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what do you think, if you could come up with just one thing that all entrepreneurs need to have?
Easy for me. If you got to have grit. If you don't have grit, non-starter. Yeah, that's such an easy answer for me. And if any entrepreneur is watching this, I'm pretty sure they're nodding, because like, it's a guarantee.
Yeah, just keep going. And
yeah,
what have you changed your mind? What have you changed your mind about in the last few years, and why?
As it relates to business,
just the first thing that popped into your head when I asked that question.
Jeepers. The first thing that pops into my head is that I've definitely found that, or realized that I don't have to win everything. I think that's probably my biggest one. I still try, but I don't have to. Yeah, I think like so many entrepreneurs or like really driven people are so goal orientated. It spills over into lots of other aspects of their life. It's like if you're chasing a scale up, you always have some kind of metric for the year of number of users you want or revenue or whatever, and that's acceptable and fine. I think it's probably not acceptable and fine when that spills over to like board games with your family at home, to use like a very extreme example. Like it's just, you don't always have to be the one like winning, hitting goals, chasing standards, whatever. Like sometimes it's okay just to be okay at something.
100%. And
Mm.
what does the future for Best10 look like?
Ideally, or what does it actually look like?
Ideally.
Ideally, look, our biggest goal as a company would be to what they call like get in a scheme. So like actually be the equivalent of what a drug is to a medical aid. So in other words, somebody, I mean, I don't know if you have medical aid. I do. When I go to the doctor for when I have flu, I don't pay for that visit. Obviously, I pay my premiums every month, but I don't pay for that visit. Or if I get medication, I don't pay for that. It's out of the medical aid. What we would like to do is be a product like that. So in other words, when somebody goes to a doctor, particularly around chronic conditions like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, obesity, that they are given the medication they need, but they're also given our program. Because I feel like without our program, those people are going to be on their medication for the rest of their lives. Whereas with a lifestyle intervention program, if it's done right, they can wean them off the medication, and that saves everybody money. And obviously, you don't want to be on medication your whole life. So yeah, look, that's our goal. It's a lofty one because, as you can imagine, the standards are very, very high to get into a scheme like that, medical schemes. But that's it. And like, yeah, the other thing I think is you don't get into a scheme like that unless you've got a lot of users that prove that the product works. And it's a really hard problem to solve. Really, really hard. Personalized weight loss at scale is up there with the hardest. And so, yeah, I mean, we have a goal of number of users we'd like to acquire over the next year and continue like with the metrics that we've managed so far, which is 97% of the users on our product lose weight. And
Wow.
we've got excellent engagement metrics and stuff. So it's super successful, but it needs to continue being as successful at more scale. That's the magic.
Amazing. Wow. And so before we end, I usually hand over the mic and ask if you have a question for me.
I do have a question. Like you and I obviously spoke before this, and you gave me some context around why you started this podcast. And
Yes.
you said that you would have ideas, and then there would be an excuse as to why not. And I mean, you're not alone there. Lots of people have them. I'd like to know what maybe the common excuse was for you, or maybe the top three, if there were three kind of things that like filtered through as you had all these ideas and didn't execute on them.
I'd say the biggest common one was time. And I'll just elaborate on that a bit in the sense that over time, the longer I didn't take action, the more time I had to persuade myself that it wasn't a good idea.
Wow, interesting. Wow.
So you think it's a great idea, and I can really relate to a lot of founders that I've spoken to where they say, just start, because you'll sort of learn and realize that like, hey, maybe it's not the best idea or maybe it isn't, but at least you tested it out in public.
Yes.
And it's not you persuading yourself that it's a failure, even if you don't know if it's good or not. But acting, so that really resonates with me in the sense that like acting immediately tests the theory with other people rather than over time. A lot of the time I didn't take action and I would then talk myself out of it, being like, oh no, it's a silly thing. Or I'd come across a similar kind of product or service, and
Okay.
I'd
Yes.
then be like, oh, okay, it's been done before. But like,
It's too
I
late.
actually had a slightly different idea. Yeah, it's too late. But I'd always just talk myself out of it. And I'd say that was the main thing with me not
Well,
doing it, is the length of an action led to me talking myself out of it. And I'd say that was the biggest one.
okay. Okay. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I completely resonate with that. I think a lot of people would as well. And it's interesting how that becomes like almost like muscle memory. It vindicates the decision to take an action, and therefore
Yes.
then you keep not acting on things. That's the muscle that starts to get stronger, as opposed to the one that's the opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's why I started trying to flex the opposite muscle of
Yes.
taking action by even following an idea that was probably pretty bad. But I'd set
Mm,
myself little goals, just to also learn how something works at the same time
mm,
as it possibly being a business. So, for
mm,
example, like this podcast, I used the same theories earlier when I came across, well, everyone came across AI, but when like ChatGPT really started,
mm.
I wanted to learn how it worked really well, and also mid-journey in the image generation. But I was like, I need to give myself some sort of product or possible business to properly learn these tools. And
Okay.
so I created a children's book for my cousin's child as a Christmas gift,
Amazing.
and then started like designing the possible business of creating like AI books for children that were completely customized. So
Okay.
you could fill in your child's name, age, their hobbies, what they like doing, a story
Mm,
that relates directly to them, like some experience
yes.
they've had. And then that would all tie
Yes.
into the story, and they'd be the main character of that story.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and so I created a few books like that, and I learned how it all worked. But then in doing my research, I realized that people with funding were creating this business idea. And so it wasn't for me, but at least I started and actually created something. And that created like the different snowball of me actually being like, okay, I need to take action. And so that was one of the first steps of me actually eventually starting this podcast, because I was
Amazing.
just fed up with not taking action.
Yeah. Yeah. Well done, man. Amazing story.
Thanks. Well, thanks for joining me today, James. I really enjoyed our conversation. I know you've recently started posting more on LinkedIn. So if people want to find out more
Yes.
about you and Best10, where can they do so?
Yeah. On my LinkedIn is definitely the best place. Yeah, you can just search for James White Best 10. We also have a Best 10 page on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, James, and speak soon. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.